The official estimate, 90 days. Admiral Nimitz gave them 48 hours. This is the impossible true story of how 1,400 shipyard workers raised a broken carrier from the dead to set the trap that would win the Battle of Midway, May 8, 1942. The middle of the Coral Sea, the deck of the USS Yorktown, CV-5, lurches violently to port, a groaning tear of metal screaming from deep within the ship. Alarms wail, a metallic, unending shriek that cuts through the concussion of nearby anti-aircraft fire and the hiss of ruptured steam lines. On the flag bridge, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher grips the railing, his knuckles white. The air is a hazy, toxic yellow, thick with the acrid smell of cordite and burning oil. Moments earlier, a single 250-kilogram Japanese bomb, dropped from a Val dive bomber, had found its mark. It was an armor-piercing round, and it did exactly what it was designed to do. It punched through the flight deck, ripped through 4 separate decks below, and only then detonated in the ship's forward engineering spaces, just above the boilers. The explosion was catastrophic. It was not a fatal blow, but it was a crippling one. Below decks, it's a vision of hell. Compartments are buckled. Watertight doors, designed to hold back the ocean, are warped in their frames. The shockwave has snuffed out the fires in 6 of the ship's massive boilers, effectively cutting her engines in half. She is listing, bleeding a thick black trail of fuel oil into the blue Pacific water. She is, for this fight, finished. The Battle of the Coral Sea, the first naval battle in history fought entirely by aircraft, where the opposing ships never saw each other, is winding down. But the Yorktown is a casualty. Her sister carrier, the USS Lexington, is already a blazing inferno several miles away, abandoned by her crew. She will be scuttled by an American destroyer before nightfall. The Yorktown survives, but she is broken. As the carrier begins the slow, agonizing limp back toward the fleet's distant sanctuary at Pearl Harbor, the initial damage reports filter up to Fletcher. Then, via coded radio dispatches, they land on the desk of Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The news is grim. The flight deck is holed. The anti-aircraft batteries are mangled. The aircraft elevators are jammed. But the worst damage is structural, deep in her guts. The hull itself is compromised, and near misses from other bombs have opened up seams below the waterline. The consensus among the Yorktown's exhausted engineers is clear. This is not a repair that can be done in the field. This isn't even a repair that can be done quickly. The ship needs a complete overhaul. She needs a shipyard. She needs months. The official estimate, wired ahead to Pearl Harbor, is 3 months. 90 days, minimum, to put her back into fighting shape. The Yorktown will be out of the war until at least late August. But Admiral Nimitz, waiting in his headquarters, doesn't have months. He doesn't even have weeks. Thanks to the brilliant, eccentric codebreakers of Station Hypo, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, Nimitz knows something the Japanese don't know he knows. He knows that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, desperate to finish the job started on December 7th, is planning an overwhelming assault. A trap. The target is a tiny atoll in the middle of the Pacific, a place called Midway. The attack is scheduled for the first week of June, just 3 weeks away. Nimitz has only 2 fully operational carriers left in the entire Pacific, USS Enterprise and USS Hornet. He cannot meet the 4 heavy carriers of the Japanese fleet without the Yorktown. He must have the Yorktown. As the crippled carrier, still trailing oil, steams toward Hawaii, the fate of the entire Pacific War rests on a simple, terrifying calculation. Nimitz needs a 90-day repair job done in 3 weeks. And even that, he fears, might be too late. May 27th, 1942, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. The USS Yorktown doesn't sail into port, she is dragged. Tugs nudge her scarred, listing hull toward dry dock number 1. As she passes the sunken, rusting remains of the USS Arizona, a grim silence falls over her crew. They see the ghosts of December 7th, a stark reminder of what's at stake. The moment the gangway is down, Admiral Nimitz is on board, his face a mask of grim determination. He is flanked by shipyard assessors and Captain Elliot Buckmaster, the Yorktown's skipper. They descend into the ship's wounded heart, into the darkness, the stench of oil, and the still hot metal. The damage is even worse than the reports suggested. The assessors move with flashlights, their voices echoing in the ruined compartments. They point to warped bulkheads, shattered electrical conduits, and severed steam pipes. The main support timbers for the flight deck are cracked. The internal structure is a mangled wreck. The lead shipyard superintendent, his hands already black with grease, confirms the initial estimate. "Admiral," he says, his voice flat, "it's 90 days. No question. We have to send her to Bremerton on the west coast. The facilities here can't." Nimitz cuts him off. His voice is quiet, but carries the weight of an iron anchor. 90 days. You don't have 90 days. You don't have 3 weeks. He looks at the superintendent, at Captain Buckmaster, and at the exhausted engineers. "I want this ship back in the line in 3 days. The silence that follows is absolute. 3 days isn't a request. It's not an order. It's an impossibility. It's madness. 3 days isn't enough time to even assess the full damage, let alone fix it." Captain Buckmaster, stunned, finally speaks. "Admiral, that's not possible." Nimitz turns to him. "Captain, Yamamoto is about to strike Midway with his entire fleet. He thinks Yorktown is at the bottom of the Coral Sea. If she isn't there to meet him, we will lose this war. You will be ready in 3 days. He turns back to the yard boss. "Whatever it takes, run your welders 24 hours a day. Use concrete to patch the hull if you have to. I don't care if she's pretty. I just need her to float, fight, and fly." The order spreads across the shipyard like a wildfire. It is an impossible task, and for that very reason, every civilian worker, every sailor, every engineer on Oahu grabs it with both hands. This is their chance to fight back. At dawn, on May 28th, the dock is dry. The moment the last of the water drains away, the swarm descends. 1,400 shipyard workers, welders, electricians, ship fitters, carpenters, and engineers. They pour onto the ship and into her hull like ants on a carcass. There is no plan, no bureaucracy, no time for blueprints. Foremen run alongside teams, chalking repair instructions directly onto the scorched steel bulkheads. "Cut here, weld this, patch this." The sound is deafening. It is a continuous, 24-hour roar of riveting guns, the shriek of metal saws, and the sharp blue hiss of thousands of welding torches. Men work in stifling, smoke-filled compartments, welding patches over the bomb-damaged hull, knowing that seawater is just inches on the other side. They don't just patch the holes, they reinforce them with heavy steel plates and timbers. Electricians, their faces slick with sweat, hang from harnesses, pulling miles of new cable to bypass entire sections of the ship's fried electrical grid. Carpenters and metalworkers attack the flight deck. They cut out the 800-square-foot hole, drop in new steel supports, and lay a new deck patch, welding it into place in a single, continuous operation. They don't sleep. They work 12-hour shifts, and when their shift is done, many simply collapse on the grass of the shipyard for a few hours before returning. Food is brought to them on the dock. The Yorktown's own crew works alongside them, rearming guns, servicing aircraft, and helping the yard workers they now see as saviors. It is not a repair. It is a resurrection, fueled by coffee, desperation, and sheer, bloody-minded patriotism. The 90-day job is being compressed into 48 hours. Morning, May 29th, 1942. Pearl Harbor. The 48-hour mark is here. The roar of the shipyard has not ceased, not for a single minute. It has become a rhythm of desperation, a soundtrack of the impossible. Inside the hull of the USS Yorktown, it is a scene of organized chaos. Men are literally pouring concrete. Following Nimitz's desperate suggestion, shipyard workers, faced with hull fractures too complex to properly weld in time, have built wooden frames, cofferdams, inside the ship's ruptured skin and filled them with fast-curing cement. It's a crude, brutal fix, a shipyard worker's version of a battlefield suture. The ship's internal structure is now part steel, part timber, and part concrete. On the flight deck, the new patch is in place. It's a misshapen scar of fresh steel, visibly different from the rest of the deck, and it's not perfectly level. The aft aircraft elevator, damaged by the bomb's shockwave, has been partially freed, but its movement is jerky and slow. In the engine room, a miracle. 3 of the 6 destroyed boilers are back online, their fires relit. The engineering crew, led by Lieutenant Commander John F. Delaney, has cannibalized parts, bypassed shattered steam lines, and rewired entire control panels. The Yorktown cannot make her top speed of 32 knots. She might, if pushed, make 25. But she can move. She can generate power. She can launch and recover aircraft. The 1,400 workers are shadows of themselves. Their faces are black with soot, their eyes red raw from welding flashes and lack of sleep. They move on pure adrenaline, their hands trembling, but they do not stop. Admiral Nimitz returns. He doesn't wait for a formal report. He walks the flight deck, his shoes clanging on the new steel patch. He nods to the exhausted sailors and the grimy shipyard workers who barely have the energy to look up. The shipyard superintendent finds him. The man hasn't slept in 2 days. He is covered in grease, and his voice is a low rasp. "Admiral," he says, foregoing any salute. She's not the ship she was. The hull patches are concrete and prayers. The flight deck is uneven. She can't make full speed. We've done all we can." Nimitz looks at the man, then at the swarms of workers still making last-second adjustments. He places a hand on the superintendent's shoulder. "What you have done here," Nimitz says, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely shows, "is a miracle. You have not just repaired a ship, you have given us a future. The order is given. Flood the dock." A siren blares. The workers, like a retreating tide, pull back, carrying their tools, their welding tanks, and their extension cords. They gather on the edge of the dry dock, a silent, exhausted army. Valves spin, and the sound of the ocean rushing in fills the concrete basin. This is the moment of truth. The Yorktown's crew, equally exhausted, stands at quarters, listening to the groans of their ship as the water pressure builds against the fresh patches. Will the concrete hold? Will the new welds split? The ship shudders. She groans. And then she floats. She is still listing slightly to port, but she is stable. She is alive. Prepare to get underway. Tugs pull the Yorktown from the dry dock. As she clears the basin, a sound begins. It starts as a murmur from the 1,400 workers on the pier, then builds into a ragged, hoarse, and thunderous roar. They are cheering. They wave welders' masks, wrenches, and hard hats in the air. They are not cheering a ship, they are cheering their own impossible victory. The Yorktown's crew lines the deck, and in a spontaneous breach of naval decorum, they cheer back. But the ship is not yet whole. As she steams past Ford Island, her flight deck is empty. Her own Air Group 5, is still shattered from the Coral Sea. They are not coming. Instead, as Yorktown clears the harbour mouth and enters the open Pacific, a new swarm appears, this time from the sky. They are the pilots of Carrier Air Group 3, borrowed from the USS Saratoga, which is still under repair on the west coast. One by one, Dauntless dive bombers and Wildcat fighters land on the freshly patched, still bumpy deck. By May 30th, just 72 hours after arriving as a wreck, the USS Yorktown, CV-5, a ghost ship, a patchwork miracle of steel and concrete, running on half her engines, sails to rendezvous with Enterprise and Hornet at a patch of empty ocean designated Point Luck. The Japanese fleet, believing her at the bottom of the sea, is sailing for Midway. The trap is now set. June 4th, 1942, 9 a.m., northeast of Midway Atoll. The decks of the USS Yorktown vibrate with the low, deep thunder of engines warming up. The air is cool, but the tension is so thick, it's almost a physical weight. On the patched, uneven flight deck, SBD Dauntless dive bombers and TBD Devastator torpedo bombers are packed wing to wing, their crews making final checks. Admiral Fletcher, in overall tactical command, has his flag on the Yorktown. His task force, including Enterprise and Hornet, has been sailing in radio silence, a phantom fleet. The first reports from Midway-based scout planes are crackling over the radio, Enemy carriers sighted. Then, the crucial detail. 4 carriers. It's the entire Japanese striking force, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. The first American strikes, launched from Hornet and Enterprise, are a disaster. The torpedo squadrons, flying low and slow, are annihilated. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet is the first to find the enemy. 15 planes attack, all 15 are shot down. Only one man, Ensign George Gay, survives, floating in the water amid the burning Japanese fleet. Next, the Yorktown's own torpedo squadron, VT-3, presses its attack. They, too, are met by a wall of anti-aircraft fire and swarms of Mitsubishi, A-6M-0, fighters. The slow, clumsy devastators are butchered. But this sacrifice, this suicidal bravery, is the key to the trap. The Japanese carrier commanders, watching their fighters shred the American torpedo planes at wave-top level, make a fatal assumption: this is the entire American attack. They order their Zeros to stay low, to finish off the torpedo threat. At that exact moment, high above at 19,000 feet, 2 separate groups of American dive bombers arrive, almost simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, leading the dive bombers from the Enterprise, had been searching for the enemy fleet, his fuel running dangerously low. By sheer luck and brilliant instinct, he spots a lone Japanese destroyer and follows it, leading him directly to the Japanese carriers. At the same instant, Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading the Yorktown's dive bombers, arrives from a different bearing. Both men look down. What they see is the impossible opportunity that will decide the war. Below them, the flight decks of 3 Japanese carriers are packed with aircraft. Bombs and torpedoes are stacked on the hangar decks, fuel lines are snaking across the decks, and the Zeros that should be protecting them are all thousands of feet below, chasing the last of the torpedo bombers. The Japanese carriers are, for this one fatal moment, completely and totally defenseless. 10:20 a.m. McCluskey's voice comes over the radio. Attack! Attack! The Enterprise bombers split, one group taking the Kaga, the other the Akagi. They push their Dauntlesses into a near-vertical 70-degree dive, the air screaming past their canopies. 2 minutes later, at 10:22 a.m., Leslie takes the Yorktown squadron down onto the Soryu. The result is annihilation. Bombs, 1,000-pounders, slam into the Kaga, igniting the fully fueled planes. The ship explodes in a chain reaction of fire and steel. The Akagi, Admiral Nagumo's flagship, is hit next. A single bomb plunges through her flight deck and detonates in the hangar, turning the ship into an instant inferno. The Yorktown's planes, screaming down on the Soryu, score multiple direct hits. The bombs shatter the deck, tossing planes overboard like toys, and the carrier is engulfed in flames. In less than 5 minutes, 3 of the 4 carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor are burning from bow to stern, effectively destroyed. The impossible presence of the Yorktown, the ship the Japanese believed was sunk, has provided the crucial second wave of dive bombers that, combined with Enterprises, sealed the trap. But the battle is not over. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryu, is still out there. She has escaped the initial attack, and her scout planes, unlike the others, have found their target. They have found the Yorktown, June 4, 1942, 11:50 a.m., aboard the USS Yorktown. A brief, almost stunned, quiet has settled over the carrier. The last of her victorious dive bombers have been recovered. On the flight deck, crews are rearming and refueling, the smell of aviation gas mixing with the smoke drifting across the ocean from the distant, burning Japanese carriers. There is a sense of grim, brutal satisfaction. They did it. The trap worked. Then, the radar room erupts. Bogies. Unidentified aircraft, bearing 330, range 30 miles, Angels 20. It's the Hiryu. She has launched her counterstrike. Captain Buckmaster's voice is sharp over the 1MC. All hands stand to battle stations, prepare to repel air attack. The Yorktown's patched-together boilers strain, pushing the ship to a desperate 25 knots. Her anti-aircraft guns, the 5-inchers, the 1.1-inch Chicago pianos, and the 20mm Oerlikons, swivel towards the threat. They appear as specks, high in the sun, 18-Val dive bombers, escorted by 6 Zeros. They are veterans, they are precise, and they are coming for the Yorktown. The sky explodes. The 5-inch guns bark, throwing up a cloud of black flak. The 20mm and 1.1-inch guns join in, a deafening, hammering roar, stitching the sky with tracers. But the Vals dive through it, unfazed. At 12:06 p.m., the first bomber, piloted by Lieutenant Michio Kobayashi, screams down. He ignores the flak, ignores the tracers, and releases his bomb from just 1,000 feet. The 500-pound bomb smashes into the flight deck, just aft of the midship elevator. It explodes, peeling the deck open like a tin can. The blast scythes across the deck, killing the crews of 2 1.1-inch gun mounts instantly, shredding planes, and starting a massive fire in the hangar bay below. But the Hiryu's pilots are not done. A second valve follows. This bomb hits the ship's massive funnel. It is a devastating blow. The bomb rips through the smokestack and detonates inside the boiler uptakes. The explosion snuffs out the fires in all 3 of the newly repaired boilers. The Yorktown shudders violently. Black smoke pours from her stack, followed by an ominous, ghostly white plume of steam. Her engines die. A third bomb hits the forward section, near the elevator, starting another fire. The ship goes dead in the water. She is burning. She is adrift. And, worst of all, the rudder is jammed hard to starboard. Again, the Yorktown's crew, the heroes of the Coral Sea, refuse to let her die. The damage control parties, led by the legendary Lieutenant Commander Joseph C. Joe Delaney, descend into the smoke-filled, scalding hot engineering spaces. They fight fires, bypass ruptured lines, and manually struggle with the steering gear. On the flight deck, crews push burning aircraft overboard and battle the hangar fire with CO2 and foam. Within an hour, they have contained the worst of the blazes. They have even begun patching the flight deck. It is another impossible feat, but the Hiryu knows the job isn't finished. At 14:30, the radar room screams again. Bogies, bearing 340, range 15 miles, Angels 4. This time, it's torpedo bombers, 10 Kate bombers, escorted by Zeros, flying low and fast, just 50 feet above the water. The Yorktown, her engines barely restarted, is only making 18 knots. Her rudder is still sluggish. She is a wounded duck. The Kates split into 2 groups, a classic anvil attack, designed to catch the carrier in a pincer. The ship's portside batteries open up, a frantic, desperate wall of fire. They hit several planes, but the rest bore in, dropping their fish at point-blank range. Captain Buckmaster orders a hard turn, but the ship doesn't respond fast enough. At 14:41, a lookout screams, "Torpedoes! Portside!" 2 Type 91 torpedoes, the deadliest in the world, slam into the Yorktown's port hull, almost simultaneously. The explosions are catastrophic. They rip a 60-foot hole in her side. The shockwave shatters the temporary concrete and timber patches from the Pearl Harbor repair. The ocean, which they had held back for so long, pours in. The ship is hit in her vital organs. Her fuel tanks are ruptured. Her portside engine rooms flood instantly. The Yorktown lurches, wounded beyond recovery. The lights flicker and die. The ship begins to list, heavily, to port. 20 degrees, 23 degrees, 26 degrees. She is capsizing. The miracle repair in Pearl Harbor bought the Yorktown just enough time to set the trap. Now, the price of that miracle is due. June 4th, 1942, 14:55 p.m. The deck of the USS Yorktown. The world is tilted. The port side flight deck is now touching the churning, oily water. The starboard side rises 50 feet into the air. Men are not walking, they are climbing. Captain Buckmaster, clinging to the island superstructure, receives the final report from damage control. The words are choked out by a runner. All power is lost. All engineering spaces are flooded. We are capsizing, sir. She cannot be saved. For the second time in a month, Buckmaster is forced to make a decision that tears at a captain's soul. He looks at his ship, the ship that was resurrected at Pearl Harbor, the ship that just hours ago was the avenging angel of the fleet. Now, she is a dying wreck, her back broken. His voice, amplified by the battery-powered bullhorn, cracks across the angled deck. Abandon ship, abandon ship. There is no panic, only a grim, orderly exodus. This crew has been here before. They know the drill. Men on the high starboard side unfurl ropes, lines, and fire hoses, lowering themselves down the massive, sheer cliff of the hull into the water. Men on the low port side, their feet already wet, simply step off the deck and into the sea. The wounded are lowered first, passed down in wire stretchers. Destroyers, like the USS Bolch and USS Benham, nose in dangerously close, their own decks heaving in the swell, pulling hundreds of oil-soaked survivors from the water. Admiral Fletcher has already transferred his flag to the heavy cruiser USS Astoria. From its bridge, he watches the Yorktown die. But the Yorktown's story is not over. Even as her crew is in the water, her last contribution to the battle is in motion. Before the torpedoes hit, a Yorktown scout plane, piloted by Lieutenant Samuel Adams, had been searching for the last Japanese carrier. At 14:45, his message electrifies the American fleet's radio net. Enemy carrier sighted. Bearing 010, distance 110 miles. Her deck is full of planes. It is the Hiryu. She is preparing to launch a third, final strike to finish off the Americans. Admiral Raymond Spruance, now in tactical command aboard the Enterprise, does not hesitate. He has 24 dive bombers left, a mixed group from Enterprise, and, crucially, several orphaned SBDs from the Yorktown who had been recovered by Enterprise earlier. This patchwork squadron, led by Enterprise's own Lieutenant Wilmer, Dick Gallagher, launches into the sky. At 1700, they find the Hiryu. Just like her sisters, her deck is crowded with planes. Just like her sisters, her Zeros are out of position. The American dive bombers, many of them Yorktown planes, avenge their dying ship. They push into their dives. 4 1,000-pound bombs slam into the Hiryu's flight deck. The explosions are catastrophic. The deck is peeled back, and the ship is engulfed in a massive, uncontrollable fire. The fourth and final Japanese carrier is destroyed. The Battle of Midway is over. The impossible trap, set by the ghost ship from Pearl Harbor, has succeeded beyond Nimitz's wildest dreams. Back at the Yorktown's position, the rescue destroyers pull away, their decks crammed with survivors. The carrier, miraculously, refuses to sink. She remains afloat, a gutted, listing monument, abandoned by her crew. She has paid the price for the 48-hour miracle. The 1,400 workers at Pearl Harbor had given her just enough life to fight, and in that fight, she had changed the course of the war. June 5, 1942. Dawn. The Pacific Ocean. The USS Yorktown is still there. She floats, a defiant ghost, listing so heavily that her portside hangar deck is awash. She has survived the night, alone. The American fleet, having won the greatest naval victory in its history, is now in pursuit of the retreating Japanese. But Admiral Fletcher cannot forget the ship that made it possible. He orders a destroyer, the USS Hughes, to stand by the wreck, just in case. When the Hughes arrives, her crew is astonished. The carrier is still afloat, her massive battle flag still flying from the mast. A message is relayed to Nimitz. The Yorktown is stable. Hope flickers. A ship this tough, this symbolic, cannot be allowed to die. The order is given, a salvage operation. By the afternoon of June 6th, a new team has assembled. Captain Buckmaster, refusing to leave his command, returns to the tilted, lifeless deck of his ship. He is joined by a salvage crew of 170 men, volunteers from other ships. They are accompanied by the destroyer USS Haman, commanded by Commander Arnold E. True, the Haman carefully nestles alongside the Yorktown's starboard side, the high side. Lines are thrown across. The destroyer is to act as a floating power station, providing electricity for the pumps and compressed air for the tools. The volunteer crew gets to work. It is a perilous, heartbreaking task. They counterflood starboard compartments to try and correct the list. They begin the long, slow process of pumping water out of the flooded portside holds. They cut away wreckage and patch the most severe holes from the inside. They are, once again, trying to do the impossible. But they are not alone. Unseen, unheard, a Japanese submarine, the I-168, has been hunting for them. The I-168 had been ordered by Yamamoto himself to find the American ghost carrier that had haunted his fleet and send her to the bottom. At 13:30, the I-168's periscope breaks the surface. Her captain sees the perfect target, 2 American ships, lashed together, dead in the water. He gives the order. Fire. A spread of 4 torpedoes leaps from their tubes. A lookout on the Hammond screams, "Torpedoes! Starboard bow!" The Hammond's 20mm guns open up, frantically trying to detonate the torpedoes in the water. It's useless. Commander True orders full astern, trying to tear his ship away from the Yorktown. There is no time. The first torpedo, running true, passes under the Hammond and slams into the Yorktown's starboard side, exploding with a muffled roar. The second torpedo strikes the Hammond directly amidships. The small destroyer, barely 1,500 tons, is obliterated. The torpedo breaks her keel in 2. She is torn apart, her boilers exploding in a sympathetic detonation. In less than 4 minutes, the USS Hammond is gone, sinking beneath the waves, taking 80 of her crew with her. The third and fourth torpedoes also hit the Yorktown. The wounded carrier, which had already absorbed 2 bombs and 2 torpedoes, shudders from these 2 new, mortal blows. The salvage crew is tossed like dolls. The concrete patches, the new welds, the prayers, none of it matters. The ship is shattered. Captain Buckmaster, for the 3rd time, gives the order to abandon ship. This time, there will be no return. The Yorktown lingers for the rest of the day and through the night, a testament to her sheer toughness. But she is dying. At 04:58 on the morning of June 7th, 1942, the end comes. With the first light of dawn touching the Pacific, the USS Yorktown, CV-5, begins her final roll. Her battle flags are still flying. She turns over onto her port side, hesitates for a moment, and then, stern first, slides beneath the waves. She sinks into 18,000 feet of water, taking her place in history. The 90-day repair job, compressed into 48 hours by 1,400 exhausted heroes, had given the US Navy the 4 days it needed. The broken carrier, the impossible trap, and the ghost ship of Pearl Harbor had traded her life for the victory that would turn the tide of the entire Pacific War.